We would like to welcome you again to the Community Violence Intervention Addressing Gangs Effective Street Outreach webinar. As a reminder, this webinar is being brought to you by the National Gang Center, which is supported by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. The National Gang Center exists to help communities implement comprehensive solutions to prevent gang violence, reduce gang involvement, and suppress gang-related crime. For more information about the Gang Center, we recommend visiting the website listed on this slide. It is anticipated that this webinar will draw questions, and our presenters will be glad to address those at the end of the presentation during the panel discussion and Q&A. You are welcome to submit your questions at any time by using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, all microphones and webcams have been disabled to avoid background noise and distraction. This webinar will be recorded and emailed to everyone who registered, along with a copy of the webinar slides. It will also be posted on the National Gang Center website and YouTube channel. I would like to thank you all again for joining us. I will now go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Celeste Vojdalevich, a Senior Research Associate from the National Gang Center, to begin the webinar.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some. Thank you all for joining us today. We are very happy to be participating in this webinar with you. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention for their support and their role in their efforts to support sites across the country and for this type of training that we're providing today. To get us started, I would like to just briefly talk to you about the webinar objectives. At the conclusion of this webinar, participants will be able to explain the role of street outreach as a community violence intervention strategy in the context of the OJJDP Comprehensive Gang Model. And for those of you who are not familiar with the OJJDP Comprehensive Gang Model, it was developed in the 1960s through the University of Chicago. Dr. Spergel was the main driver for this initiative, and it was replicated. The Little Village project was replicated in the mid-1990s in sites across the country. And it is a model or an approach, a framework, if you will, to address gang violence in communities large and small. It's a combination of prevention, intervention, and suppression, knowing that not one strategy alone can reduce gang violence or bring safety to the streets and bring alternatives for youth. It also has a set of 5 interrelated strategies. Some of you may have heard of them: social intervention, organizational change and development, opportunities provision, which really is dealing with education and job training, as well as opportunities provisions, social intervention, and community mobilization. And community mobilization is really working with the community, getting support and bringing everyone together to really bring about change. It's really talking about systems change. The second objective will be to recognize street outreach as an effective community violence intervention strategy. Community violence is a concern for everyone, and I'm sure everyone who's on this webinar today is looking for solutions in their communities. And through this webinar, we hope to give you some information about strategies to working in the field directly with those youth who are engaged in gang violence and street activity. And then the third objective is to recognize strategies for identifying, engaging, and assessing gang-involved youth and their needs, which is really important to understand who to identify, how to engage them, and how to really and fully understand what types of resources they need. And through that, I think we'd also understand what are some of the gaps in services. So street outreach workers are the front lines to reduce community violence through engaging gang-involved youth and youth at high risk for gang involvement, expanding their opportunities and creating more positive pathways. And as you will hear from both of our very experienced presenters today, they will discuss the differences between street outreach as it pertains to working in the field with gang involved youth or youth that are high risk, and how that may differ from street outreach work as you may hear about it in a general context. Some of the support behind street outreach, we have a list of resources here and research that has been done on street outreach. This is a select list. I'd encourage you to look at some of these to learn more about how outreach can impact your community and can lead to violence reduction, and some strategies that you may be able to incorporate into your existing initiatives, or you may look at in trying to initiate in your communities. So today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our presenters. As I mentioned, they're both highly experienced in the world of street outreach. Jay Franklin is a safety manager, gang specialist for the Riverside County, California Office of Education, providing oversight and development of school safety protocols and interventions. As one of the original street outreach workers to implement Comprehensive Gang Model, Mr. Franklin has spent more than 20 years of extensive experience working with youth, families, and communities. He is also a consultant with the National Gang Center, where for more than 15 years, he has provided technical assistance on the Comprehensive Gang Model to communities nationwide as a specialist in street outreach and community safety. Mr. Franklin is also the founder and director of Project One, a nonprofit gang avoidance program that provides direct services to gang-involved youth through targeted outreach, specialized training, and gang specialist certification courses. And I'd also like to mention that Jay was also one of the original street outreach workers where the demonstration site that Dr. Spergel developed was implemented. So he was one of the very earliest ones. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Victor Gonzalez. And Victor has 27 years of experience working with high-risk youth, including 23 years spent working directly with youth and adults involved in Houston, Texas area gangs. Mr. Gonzalez currently serves as the Division Director and Director of Program Services for the Mayor's Anti-Gang Office in Houston, Texas. He is in charge of supervising the delivery of service for programs in the Mayor's Anti-Gang Office, assisting with policy recommendations for the city, and training of gang intervention specialists in the office. Mr. Gonzalez also develops gang awareness training materials to educate law enforcement, school personnel, residents, community agencies, and other professionals on how to deal with gangs. He has presented on gangs at the city, state, and national level. Mr. Gonzalez also works as a consultant throughout the city of Houston, the state of Texas, and in the United States on gang intervention prevention strategies with gangs, female gangs, and how to conduct gang outreach. Through the National Gang Center, he works as a presenter and technical assistance provider to gang outreach programs, implementing the Comprehensive Gang Model in different parts of the United States. And with that, I'd like to invite Jay and Victor to say a few things that I may not have commented on regarding your background and your work in the field. So let me start with Jay. Why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right, thank you. First, I'd like to say I'm honored to present today. As Celeste said, being one of the original outreach workers back in the 90s and seeing what this evolved into, is definitely a beautiful thing. And to know that we have participants online today, nationwide, that's trying to figure this problem out. Because years ago, this was a very, very lonely field, and there wasn't a lot of people to communicate and help you through it. So to see what it's grown into, and to me, it's not just a buzzword when we talk about outreach, it's real. It's very real. I've seen the impact that it's had on communities, my own personal communities, my own personal life. And over the years, just seeing how it's just an ongoing thing. And I'm just very happy and pleased to present today, and hope you guys can get some tools to help your community.
Thank you, Jay. Victor?
Yeah, listening to that bio, actually, there's a lot more to add to that. I mean, actually, Celeste, it's 35 years in the business now. And thank you for all that are attending today. I have to echo what Jay says. This can be a lonely field, the gang outreach work. And it wasn't until I met Jay years ago that I was like, oh man, there's somebody else doing this work somewhere other part of the country. We met at a conference, and along the way for years now, through the work that we've been able to do with the Gang Center, I've met a bunch of other folks. And so if you're new to this field and this is something that you're interested in, um, we've been around a long time. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've run across some obstacles and some challenges in this work. But when you can see the life-changing things that happen with kids and communities along the way when you do this work, it really keeps you going. I mean, I've been at this for a long time. I'm going to die doing this. I'm not doing anything else. It's one of those things that you have to dedicate yourself for a long time to be able to see the change that you want to see. And hats off to OJJDP and the Gang Center for starting to look into how we can professionalize this, make this more real work. This work's really going on. It's really happening. People are doing it. And we need to praise those folks that are out there doing it. And for those that are new, welcome to the game. And we're happy to do what we can today to help you make your way on the journey that you're on with gang outreach, because it's a wonderful thing when you see the things that can happen to kids.
Well, thank you, Victor. And I'll be sure to update your bio.
Getting old.
Okay, well, now we can go ahead and move into the presentation. So here we go.
So street outreach, this is the service or the approach that creates the opportunities for the gang intervention work to take place with the gang involved youth, or those youth that are at high risk for gang involvement. So this team, to me, when it comes to the model, when I first started doing this work, I'm out there hitting the streets. I'm doing what I'm doing in the 90s, but it wasn't until the comprehensive gang model came to Houston. I was in that second wave of comprehensive gang model sites to be implemented across the country. And so I had heard about Jay, never met Jay until I met him. And so to be able to be in that second wave, and we're still doing some of the same work that we were doing there, I just added more people. This component to me is the heart. It's your eyes, your ears, it's your ground level folks that are connecting with the community and the kids and the young adults that are involved in these gangs. And in order for you to make any impact, you got to have this team running strong. This outreach group has to work together. You got to be in sync with your management, with your community, understanding what you're doing, where you're going, what your roles are. Those things are real important, because the biggest thing you're trying to do is you want to transition these kids from that lifestyle, whatever that is for them. You want to try to create those opportunities, those positive things that you can put in their lives, introduce to them, and change up that behavior to be a little bit better than what it is. Because at the end of the day, some of the things that these kids are doing, they know it's not right, but street outreach workers can be that middle ground that can bridge gaps, make sense of some things, because we can connect with those kids a little bit differently than the average person that gets out there and interacts with these kids. And you want to improve those life outcomes. Like I said earlier, it's really neat to see a kid come into a program and not really have a lot of the things that you would think he would have at 18, 17 years old. A lot of basic life skills are not there. There's a lot of emotional needs that haven't been met. And when you get to understand where they're coming from and you can walk them through their journey and help them get there, it's the street outreach component that really makes a difference and how that kid can navigate successfully to a more positive outcome with his life, where he's not gang banging like he was. He's working, taking care of his family, taking care of himself, and loving himself. At the end of the day, you got to have a purpose in life. And a lot of times when you're lost and you're out there not understanding where you're going, it's hard to go anywhere. And this street outreach team, to me, in the model, heart and soul, they're the ones connecting. Too important. You got to have them. You guys got to stay strong and get to this population that nobody wants to deal with sometimes.
This section here, street outreach workers are not. The first point on here, street outreach workers are not confidential informants or snitches. Just to understand in the context of the gang culture, when we're talking about snitches, that is a driving force with gangs and with street politics. They're trying to figure out who's on the other side, who's setting us up. So that is a mainstay with gangs. So that's very important. And if you don't understand that, just put an outreach worker or a perception of an outreach program, that they're confidential informants, they're extension of law enforcement, it is definitely deadly, or it can have deadly consequences. So that's very, very serious. And when we talk about this, we're definitely talking about safety and the perception. The perception in the community, it definitely matters. And for outreach workers to be out there and be effective, they really need to make sure that their role is clear and that that's definitely not what this work is about. And when you have outreach workers that only work with one specific gang, when you have a program, that can hinder your program. Because if Jay only works with the Southside Crips and I have all of that knowledge, and then once Jay leaves the program or moves on, then we lose that. And if Jay's the only one that could build connections with the South Side, then if the program feels, well, Jay's over there, he's from that community, he's doing good work with them, we're just gonna pull from Jay. But Jay need to be bringing his whole program in. If the South Side community, if they accept Jay, then they accept in our program. And that's the mindset that your program with outreach workers has to be. We're working with particular gangs. Outreach workers, the next bullet point, not being gang experts in court proceedings. A lot of times when it comes to gang members, the number one thing with gang members, if they get caught up, is they're trying to get out of trouble. So I'm trying to get out of the mix. I'm trying to, just do better, possibly, or I'm just trying to get out the mix because I got caught up. So we have to be very clear. And one thing with outreach workers, if an outreach worker is gonna go to court, is only to talk about what that actual youth has done within the program. But to get into, what your perception of what happened that night or what you think about, you don't know. You don't know, so you don't want to put your program in that type of position or that outreach worker. So definitely just stick to the facts of what they've done within your program, your personal relationship with that young person, and then take it from there. Outreach workers are not gang members. A lot of times having someone from the community, myself, Vic, we're both from the communities that we work in. You have to know that particular person that they're right, that they're not 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Because in a particular city, if you get a wrong outreach worker that doesn't have the best intentions and they're still dabbling in the gang, they're putting you're giving them, the city or your program, you're giving them access to a lot. If I have access to all the different gang members and all the different hoods and all the ins and outs, if I'm not on the right side of it, that could be very bad. So it's very important up front to make sure that you are getting the right person for the job. And definitely someone from the community, ex-gang member, they definitely can take your program to another level because of their experience in the life. But also you need to understand, make sure that they're right.
Where does street outreach occur? Here you're going to see all the different levels of services and the targeted group and how we kind of share the population. And this goes back to your program design and suppression. When you think of suppression, automatically we're going to go law enforcement. You're going to go DA's office, prosecution. You're going to go in that direction. And you have to be careful if you're going to be a street outreach component. You need to understand what your role is going to be in that when you have that type of component, the suppression component in your city, in your community. You don't want to you're going to cross paths, but you need to clearly define the roles because you don't want somebody looking like something that they're not, like Jay mentioned. You work for police, you're undercover, you're this and that. So many things are going to fly around. If you're going to be this outreach component and you're going to target the gang intervention or the gang kids and the gang intervention service level, then you need to understand what that looks like in your area. Do you have a gang assessment? Part of the model is you got to have a gang assessment so you kind of know where you're going. It's a tool to navigate you in the community. If you're a ground level organization and you've been there for a while, grassroots, nonprofit, if you've been there for a while and you've been in the mix with this work, you're going to kind of have an idea of where kids are at, where the problem is, where the activity is, where the members are hanging out. You kind of have to have an understanding of that when you're doing the work. Because then if not, what are you doing? secondary prevention, primary prevention. If you're going to do that, what does that look like? Some programs, designs in some parts of the country we've run across where one group does the gang involved case management services for just those kids that are gang involved, and they have a specific referral pool. And then you have kind of the high risk activities. They're a little different. There may be some community outreach, some awareness presentations, some alternative activities. There may be some things that are going on in that community that you may not have to do, but can be part of it. But I think program design is going to determine all that. But you have to really understand what your services are going to be, how you're going to roll those out, because until then, it's going to be difficult to get settled. And once people understand what it is you're doing and it's promoted and marketed that way in your community, and everybody is singing the same song from your administrative folks all the way down to the street level, because people talk. And in the neighborhoods, if I got one guy going out to the north and I got another guy out in the south, the gang members talk, and they'll go to jail with each other. They go to detention centers with each other. They go to placements together. And when they hear about your staff and, Big Tino, Mr. Vic, everybody knows what's going on. If everybody's singing the same song, your services will always have credibility and your services will always be there. But you got to determine how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, and what your design calls for.
What do street outreach workers do? First and foremost, no day looks the same. Every day is going to be different. But there are some consistent things that as an outreach worker, you need to do and strive. And the first bullet point up there, build rapport and respect the youth. That is so crucial. And it's not easy. It's not an easy task. So building rapport, just being out there. What we've done over the years, and I think that it definitely helps in this category, because a lot of people ask the question, how do you get in there? How do you engage? How do you build those relationships? What we do is we use the same things that the reason it's making them attracted to the gang. There's certain things that these young people respond to. Structure, structure matters to them. Discipline and consistency. A lot of times, if it's a program and because we want to help and we're not holding them accountable, or they see they could get away with certain things, then it's not really going to serve the purpose. So when they know, man, Jay ain't messing around, he's here to help me, but he's not playing games, it just goes a long way. It definitely goes a long way. And that's a constant that throughout your work with young people as an outreach worker, you always have to strive to keep building a rapport. Just keep that going, because that's going to get you through a lot. Also, with staying informed, outreach workers do have to know the pulse of the street. They do have to know what's going on in the hoods. They do have to know if one particular gang is really, really just turning up for some reason and really being more active and committing more violence. What's that about? We had one particular gang that we were working with, and over time, at one particular time, we worked with a lot of young people, changing some lives. And all of a sudden, it just really exploded. And out of their graffiti and out of things that they were saying and doing, a typical thing in the gang culture is, those infamous words, where are you from? And then the gang member's response, it definitely matters. So there's one particular gang, when their OGs and leaders came out of prison, they said, anybody hit any of our homies up and ask you where you from and ask us where we from, our response to them is, who do you beef with? So whoever your problem, whoever you got a problem with, we're going to beat them for the day since you hit us up. But to know that that's the mentality that their older gang members are pushing to them, we know we had to get in deep with these guys and get some real intervention stuff going. So that definitely mattered to know what's going on, who's really active in the communities, and where do the gangs hang out. All of the things that relate to the population that you're dealing with, it definitely matters. And then once you have those things in place, now, what I think is very, very important, or the core of outreach work, are these next two bullet points. If you can deal with a young person on their gang-related issues and their life situations, you really know that this outreach thing is really clicking now. When they're coming to you as an outreach worker and sharing that they have a problem within their hood and within their gang, and they're asking for some advice in that, you know that this thing is working. Then the other piece of that one is a lot of times, once they feel that they can come to you for that, then they can come to you for all these other things. And what I've learned over the years is that the majority of the things that these young people are really trying to figure out is not the gang stuff. The gang stuff matters. That may be 50%, but that on top of real life situations, like, man, you also here to help me through real life situations, it really takes it to another level. And then the next one is when something happens. And to just keep this in mind, when we're talking about gang and gang programs, we're talking about, violence in its most, deadly form. These guys are thinking and living death all the time. They're going through cycles where they're losing friends or losing family members. It's just a constant. So it's very, very real. But how do you respond to that? How do you tell someone that just lost their brother, hey man, you need to just kick back. Now ain't the time to retaliate. I don't even know you. But if you don't do the things that were on the first bullet points, if you don't build that rapport, if they don't understand that you understand what's going on in their neighborhood, you won't even be able to get to that point. But with that being said, when they come to you for those type of things, that's when you know that your gang program or your outreach program, I should say, is really, really, hitting points. And once that starts falling into place, then the last bullet point, you can start having that conversation about these alternatives and these positive replacements to the gang activity. And one thing to keep in mind, because another lessons learned, and we learned the hard way, we tried to get these young people involved in a lot of other activities and to a lot of other things. But this isn't just a fad, it's a culture, it's a lifestyle. So to take that away and to not have something to replace that with immediately, you give them any time. So once a young person, they feel like, I'm really hearing this, and I'm really feeling that there is other positive things out there. But if you don't have something to pick up the slack, that kid's like, man, I tried that ain't working. Now I'm a more hardcore gang member than I was before. Hey, Vic, if you don't mind chiming in, and I'll piggyback. Okay.
I got you. That first part is so important, because when you start moving these kids through these life challenges, understanding the resources that you have available. One thing I had to learn quick was it was like the old days. I used to do some dirt, and you had to have a plug, you had to have connections, you had to have people that you could talk to and get things done. It's no different with this work. You got to know your resources. What's your resource inventory look like? What's your job opportunities? What's your vocational trade? Where are your GEDs, your alternative education components? Where are all those things in the community that you're going to need as you become this mentor, as you become this outreach worker that they come to trust and you build a rapport with? Not only are they going to look to get your feedback on some of the gang situations they got to run across, but how am I going to get a job? Where do I get a job? I don't know how to use a computer. I'm a third year, ninth grader, sir. I'm 18. What am I going to do? Can I even pass the GED? Having the ability through case management services during the intervention process is real important to teach these kids how to access these things, expose them to these resources. Because a lot of times people go by buildings and they don't even know what's in those buildings. I'll be the first to say that. I remember when I was doing this work, I used to see this facility and I'm like, I don't even know what they're doing there. And then when I went in there, I was like, man, they got all this stuff going on in here and I didn't even know it. And I've got at least 5 kids. I can turn this resource on to these kids and these families, and they're all going to benefit. It's just, I've got to prepare them for that. I've got to advocate. I've got to be able to articulate what the services are about, how you access them, what's the criteria to meet that. They're looking at us as the guide to help find those things that'll help them become successful down the road. That as you move forward with these kids, it's just going to continue to progress. And it's going to be such a neat thing to watch a kid who never thought he could have a job, a legit job, instead of being on a corner or running drugs or spotting or looking to do some robberies, 3 or 4 robberies in an hour just to get money in his pocket, and to actually see them agree with what you're saying, or what you're saying is clicking with them. The light bulb goes off, those aha moments. Man, sir, I didn't even know it was like that. I appreciate you walking me through that. Man, I didn't even know I was supposed to ask those questions. I didn't even know that I needed to dress like that. I mean, I know I got to be preppy, sir, but I don't even know what all that's about. You have to remember, you got to break it down basic with some of these kids. And as outreach workers, remember that it's the basics that they're missing. Love, cariño, that care, that support, that guidance, that ear, somebody to let them vent to. You're that mentor for them that understands them so much differently than anybody else does, because you understand the gang piece. That is the big difference. I have a lot of people that in Houston that want to help the gang kid, but can't have a discussion about that because they're too scared to deal with them because they're full of tattoos all over their face and their head, or they have a reputation or a history for being violent and nobody wants to talk to them. Until you get inside the heart of these young kids that are involved in this stuff, the outreach worker is the one that's going to help do that and help them get where they need to get to become successful.
One last piece on that. I just want to comment on that act as a mentor. A lot of times when there's an outreach component, and once we get to the point of we've connected with the young person, now we're going to get them out there to the appropriate services, and these kids are open. Don't forget or take the mentor piece very, very serious, because anything and everything you do as an outreach worker, they're watching. They're watching, and you're still mentoring them through all of that. Just a quick lessons learned on that one. There was a young lady that she had some issues that was going on, and she opened up about something that she'd been holding in, for over 8 years, something that happened to her when she was young. So as an outreach worker, I got all these resources. I plugged her with a counseling agency, but I just set up an appointment and had her go to the agency. And it just set her back and our relationship back so much, because her thing was, Jay, I shared something with you that I haven't shared with anyone. And she felt that I just pushed it off, and it was so real when that wasn't my intent. But through lessons learned, I learned that I should have walked her through that appointment, and I should have been there for her and actually just taken that mentorship piece very, very more serious, more so than just getting her to a service.
So identifying these youth, through the observation, through outreach, in the community, visiting gang hotspots, other areas where high-risk youth frequent. You got to get to places. You got to know where those places are. You're not going to do this behind the desk. And being able to leverage referrals from other partners like schools or probation, juvenile parole. I have a lot of relationships with a lot of people here in our city and agencies and community. I got people in the community that know us, and they're the mom, they're the grandma, they're the apartment manager that know of our services. And apartment manager, for example, they're looking to put people out because of all the gang related activity in their apartments in the complex and in that unit, and they're being, set up for eviction. And a lot of times, some of these folks that know us before they go through that process and that route will say, we got a family needs help. We talked to the mom. She can't pay the rent. We told her what was going on and where we were going if her son didn't slow down. And for them to be able to refer that person to us and that family to us gave us access. I even got officers here in Houston. As much as you've got to watch that line with police, I have officers that have no problem referring kids to us and referring families to us. Victim services, when there's a gang-related issue or a victim of a gang-related crime or some violence, being able to understand what you're supposed to be getting and what you want to recruit to your program, you have to articulate that profile to your partners and your potential partners, setting that up so that they understand. Because I'll never forget when we first started this, we pushed the Gang-Free Schools project, the comprehensive gang model, to the schools. And when we pushed it, boy, let me tell you, we had so many referrals. And once you went through the referrals, it wasn't exactly what you needed in your program. It was a bunch of kids that didn't meet the criteria. And no matter what you did, trained, had meetings, articulated the profile, even put the profile on a referral form, there was such a need, people were still referring, hoping to get a kid into the program. So you've got to be able to articulate those things so that people understand what they're going to refer you, so it doesn't overwhelm you. But that goes back to your marketing, your branding, when you're out there in the community, what you're doing. And if you're the outreach worker, that's on the admin side, but the outreach worker, It's what you're saying out there and how you're saying it. You all have to be in tune. And the kids be surprised. We'll refer you other kids if they like what's going down with you, and they like that you're hooking them up and you're getting them certain things that they need. They'll do the work for you, and then they'll start telling you where other kids are hanging out. Did you hear about the new spot, sir? Did you hear about the park now? Did you hear about the complex? The complex done divided up in the hood, sir. It ain't like it used to be. The north side belongs to them. The south side belongs to the other side. You'd be surprised the types of ways and the people that you will run into that will help you work through this process. But you got to get out there. You got to boots on the ground, man. You got to get in the mud, as we say here. You got to get in the mud. You got to get out there and figure out what's happening.
Engaging and building relationships. This is the difference between a regular program and an effective outreach program. If you have the relationships in place, and if you focused on, we're constantly just trying to engage this population of youth that we're working with, it really just drives more success within your program. But if you underestimate how important building relationships are with these young people, like I said, you're going to have limited results. It'll be limited results, but you can still have results. But we've seen it just blossom into something just so much. Like Vic had mentioned, when they start talking to you about other spots and other spots to recruit other youth and bringing their homeboys in or their homegirls, like, man, they want an outreach worker too. You know, they want to get a job and they're trying to get their stuff together. It's because of those relationships and the relationships that with the client, which again, it's not easy because a true gang member, we're going against street code. You know, I'm not going to just open up to everybody. I'm not just going to be vulnerable to certain things or people. So it takes time, but understanding that the one thing that we really, that I've seen over the years that helps is definitely being consistent. And definitely being clear on your role. And sometimes, oh man, I'm cool right now. You know, I don't really need no help. I got stuff together. But if they're really in the gang life, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen, and they're gonna, man, the dude that left that card, or them dudes that come by, let me hit them up. You know, let me see if they can help me out of this situation. And a lot of times that may come from the family members. You know, a grandmother, a mother, or someone else just trying to get some help for their the young person in their life. So it definitely comes together if you stay consistent. And with that, sometimes, let's say if I have 8 kids on my caseload, but I'm only connecting with 2, you know, my main drive should be those other 8, because some you may connect early, but those 8, that's my goal. So I'm not going to push them off to the side because they're harder to, that's what we do. So we need to focus down. Every kid is just as important, and make sure that they all get that same attention. The family really matters, you know, and all the extensions of the family. When they start seeing like, man, they come to the house, they're dealing with my mom and they care about these other issues that's going on with my sister and all of that stuff. And ultimately that's all going to help me help you. So yes, we're concerned about that. And yes, if we have some resources to help you there, we're going to help you there. And that's when you really see the ongoing relationship building taking place.
And those relationships are going to help you have a better understanding with the types of services that you're going to need, because there's a lot of things you have to consider when you're providing these services to these youth, the gang involved youth. You know, the level of gang activity, the behavior, the circumstances. You can't move all in the same speed all the time. I have to echo with Jay. There's times where you want a certain kid. You can see him. I used to be back in the days. I want the hard head. I want the hardcore. I want the one who's running these kids. And when you get to them, they're not in a good space yet. You know, to really, they're so committed. They're not really ready to move into anything else other than what they're comfortable in. And so I still have a need for that young person, though. I still have a need for that guy or that female. I'll keep a relationship with them throughout the work that's being done on the streets, because just because he doesn't engage in your program don't mean you don't need him later down the road. I've had situations happen where we're running on these kids and the behavior's out of control. After 2 weeks of being in the program, he was all good, and all of a sudden kid lost his mind, and you're watching the behavior, and then you start looking at, well, what caused this? What were the circumstances that caused the light switch to go on and he went in a different direction? And when you start digging, when you have that relationship and you start digging on what's going on, you start to realize he got shot at. His sister almost got raped. They got a gun pulled on him. I was dealing with a kid yesterday. He said, Vic, I want to get down. I want to slow down. I don't want to be out there like that. But I can't get over the fact that these dudes put a gun on me and my sister and tried to rape her while they were jumping me. And I had to do what I had to do. So he said, I had to do what I had to do. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. But when you put me in that situation with my family, under the circumstances, Vic, I had to handle up, man. That's my sister at the end of the day. And then you're going to spray my car up? You're going to shoot my car up with my sister and my girl in it and my dad? I can't have that, Vic. And then when you start digging a little deeper with him and you go back to what bothers him, it's his relationship with his mother. And so his relationship with his mother, she put him out when he was 9 or 10, and the gang raised the kid. So in his mind, that's his family. But I still love my mom and I want her to love me too. So realizing what's really going on with the services and how they're going to be provided, you really need to understand what you have in front of you, because not every kid is the same. Not every circumstance is the same. All the kids react a little bit different, but understanding where they're at with the gang activity, they get tired. Some of them right in the middle of it. Some of them ain't trying to hear it. They're just exposed to it. They haven't fully engaged. It's really important for you to understand at what level these kids are involved with. And if you're a seasoned outreach worker and you're trying to turn around these kids in a matter of months, not going to happen. Not even the best. And so it takes a little bit of work, but understanding these needs are going to help you do a better job of being a little more efficient and effective when we're dealing with this population.
And today we're driving home the point of outreach work, just outreach work in general. And we're really emphasizing outreach work. But the beauty of the comprehensive gang model is outreach work within a comprehensive model. It's a beautiful thing. So the way it works within the comprehensive gang model, we have the organizational setup with a higher level steering committee and a project coordinator, research partner. And in the middle, all our conversations are about the community and this population. And then in the implementation side of the table, it's, boots on the ground, the outreach workers, and out there getting that particular portion of the model done. But then to kick that up a notch, we have an intervention team with all of the key people that may work with Johnny or may touch Johnny throughout a day or throughout his teenage years or his gang years. So probation, schools, all the different people that can help us get to a better place. And we meet on a consistent basis to just discuss these particular kids. So with that being said, when our program started going in the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, we had kids that were in the program and they would say like, man, I never knew that no one cared. They care that much about us. Like we were really getting that much attention. It's very, very powerful. And this is just a setup. And again, we've seen it work.
If it wasn't for this visual, I'm a very visual person. When they first introduced this response, this approach, the model, I was like, man, what these people know? They don't know nothing about them. They putting the model in my neighborhood. I know everybody in the hood. I know who to talk to. I know what I need to do. I can turn the key left and right. Being cocky, boy. When I was young, it was like, I got this. I don't need no help from these folks. But I'm going to tell you what, this thing, I had to shut up and sit back and humble myself, because the foundation, the structure, the guidance that comes with the model and how to navigate street outreach made my life so much easier. And it's allowed me to be able to teach my staff how to navigate and do what they needed to do when it comes to our strategies in our office. So don't underestimate how this thing can go. It looks complex and complicated, but once you get your hands on it, it's a beautiful thing to have work in your city when everybody wants to play ball with you. If it ain't for this, I'm still struggling. I can tell you that now. This thing was a huge help on the street outreach side.
If I could touch on that, just one more plug for this intervention team. The way that would look is that we have all of these key partners sitting around the table and having real discussions. And it's not just going with the flow discussions. There's been time where law enforcement had a certain perception of a young person, or probation, and even outreach. Well, I think he's doing great. No, he's not. He's out there at 2 a.m. We see him all the time. And it just, through that communication and that collaboration, it just really brings it together.
Collaboration with partners, you gotta have them. They're a necessity. You need to know how they operate. You need to know how you can gain access. Even as a street outreach worker, don't be scared to go into some of these social service agencies or these job developers and figure out, what do I need to gain access to this? What does it take for my young people to come through this? Understanding all the criteria that comes with it, all the eligibility requirements, because everybody here in a community has a place in the comprehensive gang model and street outreach work. Grassroots agencies are there in the neighborhood. They do good stuff, partnering with them and working with those grassroots that are always in connection with the community or have been in connection with the community. Here in Houston, I've got some pastors and some community agencies and some communities been there over 20 years, and they know a lot of people. And you'd be a fool not to have those people as a partner, not do some events with them, collaborate with them, do some training for them, share resources. You got to bring those people to the table. When it comes to law enforcement, probation, and parole, it was not easy for me in the beginning. Took a little while. I had a history, so it was, don't mix with him. He mixed with a bad crowd. You got to watch what he does. You can't trust him. It took a little while, and I had to do some training with those folks and kind of understand behind the scenes. And they were leery at first, but once I started to figure out what was going on, I started looking at it. How can I utilize these components to take advantage of what they have so that my kids can succeed? So I have a probation relationship and juvenile parole and probation relationship here in Houston. All the gang kids that are coming through for a gang-related crime, they are being referred to the supervision group that handles the gang kids that are coming through, that gang supervision group, and we're the referral source for that. So they send those kids to us for the help to keep these kids from not reoffending as best we can. We want to reduce the recidivism rate, introduce them to all these other services that are out there, but you cannot do this work by yourself. If you think you're going to do it by yourself, you're wrong. And as outreach workers and components that are going to have the outreach worker, agencies that are going to have the outreach component, you need to do your street outreach a favor. Get them the resources they need. Give them the direction, give them the know-how to gain access to mental health, to schools, because we've got this stuff going on all around us. And a lot of these agencies are working with the same kids. The best thing to do is to create some type of relationship with them. Do not turn them away. Get through all the politics and through the egos, please, because that's part of the problem, is that sometimes our politics and egos don't allow us to click, and we need to click if you're trying to help kids. So either you're trying to help kids or you're trying to help your ego. That one ain't gonna work. You got to be here to help the kids.
If I could echo on that, Vic, when Vic mentioned how early on it was tough with law enforcement and probation, the other beautiful thing about the way this model works is that every partner is equal. And in our situation, it was the same. You know, they felt a certain way about the outreach workers, but we felt a certain way about them also. You know, certain officers that we felt that you're not acting appropriate in the neighborhood. And the thing about this is that everybody gets called out. There's no one that's higher or lower in this particular model. And it's a beautiful thing if you're trying to do what's best for your community. Achieving success. This is when we start talking about the end game. You know, a lot of people say, we want these kids to leave the gang, or we want them to, you know, just walk away. A lot of times that may not happen, but if they change their behaviors and they just start living life, then you start seeing that they just slowly become a former gang member based on their behaviors and their activities. But to see when that light comes on, and in our program, we had numerous services. We just tried to throw everything at the kids to see what would catch on and what would click with them. So anger management definitely is a real one with this population. So one thing that through our anger management classes, the instructor would always talk to the young people and to us as outreach workers about these magical moments. And to experience those with young people. And the magical moment wasn't that they left the gang. The magical moments were those small moments where you could see that glimpse of hope, or you could see that light came back on. Because a lot of these young people, their stories, and that's another thing, when you're an outreach worker, you get to hear that whole story, or you get that full kid, and that's very real. And sometimes that can be overwhelming if you don't have support in that. And when we would get that, and that magical moment, some of these kids with what they endured way before they became a gang member, way before that, you know, what made them so angry, what made them so violent, what made them want to just get out there. Once you start diving into all of that, you see that some of the trauma that they've been through, that joy was taken out of them at a young age. And to see that hope is coming back, and to see that they're thinking about tomorrow. We had some that was actually on what we call suicide missions. Their homeboys was thinking like, oh man, they out there, he crazy, or he putting in work, or he going to the enemy hood by himself and doing graffiti. And it made no sense. Like at the time when they know they were there, that wasn't being hard or just trying to, you know, get stripes within your neighborhood. We had young people, they were really trying to check out. You know, no, life was smothering them. But when we start seeing that they have that joy again, and start seeing that they're thinking about tomorrow and they're talking about it, and not just because we're in a class and in a session and it's the right thing to say, but they really are asking questions and, hey man, can you pick me up? And I'm curious about this. You know, that's that moment. And those are the things that, you know, we cherish and we try to move forward with.
Early on, remember small wins. I try to teach my staff, you got to have small wins in the beginning, getting them to school, even looking at exploring, getting a job, the bettering the relationship with the mom or their dad, having a better mindset, being more positive. Again, you got to really go basic with a lot of these kids, because it's sad when you first meet these young people and they come to you and they don't have very much expression. A lot of it's anger, it's violence, sometimes depression. And you're looking at them and you're like, you know, man, what happened to this kid? And until you get in there and dig and really understand where they're coming from, it comes from things that they didn't get. A lot of love, they didn't get no love. They look at it as a lot of hate. Everybody hates on me. Trying to get them to understand it's the behavior, not them. It's the things that they've done, the things that they've said. Goes back to, you know, I got down with this clique, I got down with the set, Vic, and I put in work, and man, they praise me every time I go out there and hunt somebody. I hunt somebody, I move some dope, you know, I pull all these robberies, and Vic, man, they show me so much love, and man, I don't even know what to do with it sometimes. And then I have to remind them, I said, man, your parents show you love all the time, and you don't even know how to take that. You're so used to being in the gang and receiving love for things that are not very positive, but you got a mom who sits there and cries and worries about whether you're going to come home or whether she's going to get that call or not from the medical examiner's office. We just worried about whether you're going to come home or not. And sometimes you got to understand with these kids, the hope is not there. But when you do this work and you're that group that connects with that kid and that kid gets you, and he's like, you get me, I got you, sir. I mean, here some of the kids call me padrino. I'm somebody's godfather every other week. I'm the ángel de los pandilleros. I'm the angel. I'm the gangster. I'm the angel for the gangster. When you can replicate that with your staff and you can put that out there for your kids, and the people in the community know that, and they know as the outreach worker that you are in the program that you've created and are trying to implement and pushing, when you become that, you're a savior for a lot of kids and a lot of families. Bet on that. Schools, probation and pro, like, man, we ain't had this many kids succeed. They're doing well. They're not reoffending. They got jobs. They got tattoos removed. They're doing great things. They smile more. They hugging people. They shake hands. They got positive eye contact. They ain't slumping over. They're not with their head down with the hoodie over their heads and their faces. They somebody, Vic. They bright. They're open. They said they full of love. And I said, we got to keep giving it to them. You got to keep giving them support and the guidance. And when you can see that on their journey, you're doing some success. You're doing some good stuff. It's hard to measure. It's not always what you want it to be. It's not always going to happen how you want it. But I guarantee you, these kids will ride with you when they trust you and really believe in what you're talking to them about and how you're really trying to get them to where they always want to be. And they want a better spot. They want to be happy. So remember that when you're doing in the work, because I had a kid tell me one time, if I'm going to put my life in your hands, Vic, You better not do me wrong, sir. Don't do me wrong like all these other people. They lie to me. Don't lie to me. Even if you got to tell me the truth and it'll hurt, I'd rather you tell me the truth than have me find out you was lying to me the whole time. So don't let me put my hands in your life, Vic. Don't put my life in your hands. Be serious with me, sir, for real. On the cool, be serious with me. So when he said that, I've treated every kid like that until they tell me I don't want to get down with you no more. I don't want to get down with your program, your people, none of that. So remember, this stuff is serious to them. So if you're going to try to get them there, make sure that you take them for the ride and understand what it really is. Because if you promising stuff, you better deliver. Because if not, you hurting folks. We're not helping. And with that, I'm gonna take this back over to Celeste to kind of lead us into the end of this. It's been a good one. I appreciate you guys for listening. Appreciate you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Victor. That was an incredible discussion, and you brought up some excellent points, things that I'm sure everyone will take back with them as far as the importance of the safety, from the importance of the safety on the streets to the seriousness of the work that you do and how genuine, how that came through, obviously, how genuine you are and passionate you are about your work, and how that is so necessary to do this type of on the ground, in the streets, everyday work. So I appreciate that. We are going to move into the panel Q&A now. We received a lot of great questions from the participants today. We may not be able to get through all of them, but we're going to do the best that we can. So we're going to start off with one of the first questions would be, how do you know if a street outreach worker is truly out of the gang and not just straddling between the gang and being an outreach worker? And I know you both have had experience in this area. So Jay, would you like to go first on this one?
Yeah. To me, the biggest one would be the kids will tell you. I mean, of course, you have to supervise it and watch it yourself, but definitely monitor how they're behaving with the kids. And if it's more street than professional, that's definitely something. And when you start feeling it, even if it's just a little bit, you should pull them in immediately to talk to them about it, because you don't want to be wrong, but I wouldn't let it grow. So if there's any questions you have or anything else, when something comes up, I just recommend that you strongly address it immediately and get their side of it, but you need to monitor it throughout.
One of the follow-up questions to that, and Vic, maybe you could answer this one, is, well, then how would you vet the street outreach workers? So it's kind of a combination of that. Are they in the gang? Are they out of the gang? How do you vet them? How do you know who you're working with?
Well, it's kind of a little bit what Jay said. You know, if you work the streets, you know, and you're going to know people who know these people, and you'll be able to ask a few questions on the street. The other part of that, this is the beauty of having the model. If you have law enforcement, you have probation, parole, you have other folks there that are around, may know the same person, and sometimes you could maybe get some little insight on that to figure out what's really going on. But I've had both. I've had ex-gang members do the work, and I've had some that just had maybe family members that were gang involved or lived in a gang impacted area, and they weren't immune to the activity and to the violence and to the dynamic. But you have to really go back and look at how stable have they been, education, any work history, what's some other work history that you've had. I'm real big on interviewing, even if it's informal on the phone, because I've had some folks try to get through, and it's kind of like, nah, I already heard about you. I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate you want to do the work, but this work is we're trying to make it a little different with the professional side. You got to know how to document. You got to know how to have some structure in your life. You got to know how to follow rules and policies and procedures and work a calendar and be able to be flexible, and the pay ain't gonna be what you thought it was going to be. And, you know, if you was on the block making money and you getting into this field, you're not making the money on the street that you was making in the field. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't add up. So being able to understand what that is, there's a lot of different ways. We have a process on the application process that has a specific criteria. If you don't meet the criteria, you don't even get in unless I ask for it. but it takes a little bit of work. But if you do the work on the street, you're gonna know. People gonna tell you.
As a follow-up, thank you for that, Vic. And as a follow-up to that, Jay, what kind of training or professional development do you offer, or would you suggest that somebody out there that has an outreach program or starting one would consider for the outreach workers?
Yeah. Before I get into that, just to tell in a quick response to the previous question.
Oh, sure.
But with that being said, most outreach workers or someone that wants to get into outreach work, that's an ex-gang member, they have some type of track record of doing that already, just within their neighborhood and with people. So that's a clear one to look at early on with vetting and to see where that person's at. Me, for example, and I think Vic could attest to the same, this was something that I was doing in my neighborhood anyway. And I was looked upon as that type of guy within my neighborhood anyway. So when this came about, like they put a job and a title to it, it just, made it a good fit. So that's something to keep in mind. What type of work have they done? And with that, as far as their own, with trainings and professional growth, definitely, as we stated in the presentation, building relationships is crucial to this work. So definitely anything with that, any ongoing trainings with that and how to engage a difficult population of high-risk youth, that definitely will benefit from that. One that I feel that lessons learned that we missed early on, but we have it implemented now, was anything with grief, how to deal with grief and trauma, and to have those tools in your tool belt. It's definitely, beneficial. And how to, with just basic mentorship, and how to be there and how to have the proper transitions, like the story I shared about the young lady and how I could have dealt with that differently had I been trained on that. And the one thing, I think in a comment it asked what possibly could have been done differently in that situation, I just made the appointment and let her family know, and it was on Tuesday at 4, and I didn't see her, talk to her, anything. But me just being there with her and letting her know I made this appointment and I can take you there, just getting her through that process and seeing where she's at instead of taking it for granted. Those are all huge. Then again, there's so many other things that can just pop up in your community that you may have to address also.
And I just comment on that, Jay. That's a great point, because outreach itself is the main service. It's the main, that engagement piece. And oftentimes outreach is misunderstood as someone who just maybe connects them to the service and is actually not providing that. And I think that's a great example of that, of how you're engaged with that person, not in a professional counseling arena, let's say, but you're really engaged with that person. There's a relationship there. And I heard relationship throughout this the course of your presentation today. So any thoughts on how this model could be applied to a set of targeted violence? So the comprehensive gang model, how is this applied when there's violence, for targeted violence, or it's occurring in a particular region of the community?
So for me here in Houston, again, the model, because of all the different layers that are involved with this and all the different partners that you come together, and my relationship with law enforcement is much better than it has ever been. I can do what I need to do, stay in my lane and still have my boundaries. I can work with schools. I can work with criminal justice agencies. So things are much better in that regard. So whenever we have a crisis in a certain part of the city, here on purpose, I have my outreach workers in what we call our hot areas. In those hot areas, those are our high gang crime areas. We have about 4 in the city, and my folks are in those areas at the parks, the projects, the apartment complexes, the schools. We're all in those areas. When we have these intervention team meetings, I ended up creating 4. I started with 1, and the original one that we started back in 2001 is still going. And the average, the other 3 that are going on now, the average time that I've had those going are about 11 or 12 years now. And so being able to have all those different people at the table, being able to have relationships at a higher level with command staff or principals or directors of agencies, whenever we have something popping off in the neighborhood or in a school, we know how to move, whether it's high visibility, whether it's target enforcement. If the gang unit is moving out there from HPD, if they're moving and they know what's going on, they're going to do what they got to do: investigate, surveillance, arrest, lock it down, right? High visibility, do what they got to do. On our end, we're the ones, if it's on the perimeter of a school, we're moving kids along. We know some of the kids from the gang. We know what the beef is because we work on the campus. These kids ain't even from the campus. They're from off campus. They've come from another area to come over to support the ones on campus because they're outnumbered. When you have different types of information and you have different types of understanding of the dynamics in whatever setting you're in, you're able to come up with those different types of strategies that can disrupt, deter, or prevent things from happening in the community. But you got to want to play with us guys. And outreach workers, sometimes people don't want to play with us because they don't trust us. They don't think we're on the right side of the fence. For a long time, because of the people that I hung out with, they got popped by the DEA, so he just like them. So you can't trust him. And so it takes a little bit of understanding what's going on in the street outreach component, and the program can really help leverage other resources if you have the right people at the table to be able to look at targeted enforcement a little bit differently than just one group doing it by itself. Everybody can play a part in it.
Mm-hmm.
I could
Okay,
add to
anything?
that. Yes, you know, that question actually brings it all together, because that's outreach, or that's what we should be here for. You know, hopefully there's not a lot of those situations, but the reality is that's what this is all about. You know, and how can we diffuse those situations? How can we get on the front end of those situations? So with that being said, if something happens, let's say if there's two rival gangs, there's a gang homicide, and to just, I guess, kick the conversation forward, a kid that you're working with, you know, we've had situations where we had a kid that was in our program that was murdered by another kid in our program. And we worked with both gangs, and they both going at each other in funerals and court appearances. So we had to do targeted outreach through that whole process, you know, and as Vic said, having a team. But as far as that core stuff with the gangs and with the gang violence and what's going on and what's the temperature out there, that was us. You know, the police had what they had, probation had what they had, the schools, but we were in the thick of that. And for an outreach component or outreach workers to shy away in, you know, that's when outreach has to show up. You know, that's the core of the job, is to get in there because we don't want more. Anything we can do to diffuse it. And over the years, you know, there's numerous examples of how outreach was able to stop killings and stop things from escalating.
Mm-hmm.
It's really neat when you can, if I can add to that, Celeste, it's really neat when I've watched this from the beginning and how this outreach component has had me where I'm at for 22 years. In January, it'll be 22 years in the mayor's office now. I've been to 5-6 different mayors, and being able to see where we were at and where we are now, because of the model, because of this component, because of the work, is driven so much credibility that the people in power are saying, you know what, we're going to keep it here and let's keep taking it to the next level. But it started with just our little outreach program, getting out there, being in the streets, diffusing situations, helping kids, doing this and that in all the areas of the community, that we're still there. And I would have never thought I would be in a meeting like I was this morning, listening to them tell me, do what you want, we got your back. And I learned that in 1 hour, and I've been trying to get it for the last 5 or 6 years, just because we've had change of command here in the city. And so you never know what you're gonna end up accomplishing. And this model and this component can really help you get there. So don't think it doesn't. It can. It can make a lot of noise for you.
Thank you for that, Vic. And one of the other questions that we do have regarding the youth in your program is, how many youth on average would you have in your program, or per caseload? I guess that would be it. Probably the question would be per outreach worker. How many youth could each outreach worker realistically do a good job with? Not how many they have generally, but how many should they have? That might be the better question.
Yeah, I would say once you start getting over 20, 15 to 20, you can do some quality outreach work. Starting out, then over time, you know, you can maybe increase that. But from 15 to 20 to start, that's a good number.
Okay. Same for you, Vic?
Yeah, at any given time, I think that's a good number. One thing about the comprehensive gang model, we learned all the different levels of service. So different levels give you different service contacts, deliverables, and the dosage. So it gives you a little bit better way to navigate. We've been around a little while, so usually I push anywhere between that 50 to 60 kids a year. But you got to remember, some of those kids are going to be closing out. They latch on, they do well, they move on, they move real quick, and they get what they need, and they're off and running. And then you have those that are a little more difficult, that you're going to hit and miss, may come in and come out. So you have to really be able to balance that situation out. So as an administrator, you need to pay attention to what it is that you're going to be able to allow your staff to work with in the beginning or as you move forward, because you don't want to have too many and not be able to do too much because it's just a lot of work. These kids are very challenging.
And for both of your programs, are there certain criteria that you use? Do you have a set criteria that you use? And what is that set criteria?
So here in Houston, because I'm in a certain part, I have my team in certain parts of the city. I'm looking for certain type of gang members. I'm looking for certain kids coming from certain gangs. I'm looking at those kids that are very active. We'll do some other prevention strategies with kids in schools. We might do presentations in groups and stuff like that. But if you're going to get case managed and I'm looking to diffuse or I'm looking to be in the middle of the stuff, I got to reach those kids that are banging in that target community. So the criteria is going to be the 14 to 25, that kid that's a little more active, male or female, coming from whatever gang that's causing the most issues in that area. If it was one thing I learned from the model, when we started it, we had 16 gangs, but when you start breaking down the statistics, it was really only 8. And out of those 8, you were able to break down exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it. Looking at our gang assessment, they gave me a better idea of where we should have been going, who we should have been targeting, because it broke it down for you through the assessment. So that was a huge help. Then I had an advantage because I was from there, and I already kind of knew what was going on. So you kind of know who's driving it. But if you're going to make an impact, you got to go after what's driving the violence.
Mm-hmm. Jay, thank you, Vic. Anything, Jay, to add to that?
Yeah, just the same criteria here. And that the partners really help with that, to really know that you have a pulse on that you're hitting the right target. You know, hearing from probation, hearing from the schools, and hearing, you know, if they have a kid that's really active, and law enforcement with FIs out in the field, you know, that really helps with making sure you hit your target within that criteria.
Okay, that's great. As far as the team, and I know you spoke about the intervention team, you both did, about the intervention team. So to reach the end goal, right? Is it better to have a small or a larger team? Does it matter? So
I think you have to develop the right team. I on average, I have, on a good day, I'll have 20 to 25 people, but they're all from different groups. They're not the same group. On a slow day, I got 10 to 15, but it's the right people. It's the people that are understanding what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it. Don't care what agency you're from, just that you know that we're here to help the kids first. We're here to provide those services and give those opportunities to these kids and help them work through their challenges to get where we all want them to be, and that's to be more successful. But I think you have to have the right people at the table. I do a lot of vetting before, even when I started all the other different IT meetings. I on purpose went out probably 6 months ahead of time before I started to think of doing it and connecting with people. I was connecting with people way in advance on purpose because I knew 6 months down the road, I wanted to kick this off. So being able to find the right officer, the right administrators, the right social service agencies, the right POs, you know, it's really helpful when you can do that up front. And you need to kind of make a demand that that's what you bring here. Don't bring me somebody that doesn't agree with what you're doing, because then they just disrupt what you're trying to do. And come in with, we all have our agenda here, not your agenda from where you're at. Don't bring that over here. We know what you need to do, but do it over there. Here it's about the kids. So it's about the right team, in my opinion.
okay.
I agree. And it's not about just saying that you're a part of the new program that's clicking right now. If you're not bringing nothing to the table, then yes, we can have a small team, and we're going to grow that team out of the needs of our clients.
Yep, that's a great point. And the right team is absolutely essential to getting the work done. So that was great. We haven't, one of the questions that I think has been asked throughout, and I think it's kind of a theme, is just, so if you're just kind of one of the final questions, so if you're looking for a street outreach worker, the key characteristics, how would you just sum that up? And then if you could just, within that, could you just talk briefly about if you're starting it, if somebody's out there and they're just starting an outreach program or they're just starting an outreach initiative, what advice would you give them? So just, you know, just kind of sum those two things up. Ideal street outreach worker, and what are some of the factors or things that you have to look at if you're starting an outreach program? Victor, you want to go?
Yeah, they gotta have some stability in their life. History, a work history of some sort. It's kind of hard to get through our process now without having some education behind you, some work experience. You got to have some of that. I mean, in this work, it's hard to find the right people. I got to look for those that are passionate, open-minded, can be flexible. I don't mind somebody coming in a little cocky, a little bit of like, you know, I'm confident, but you got to be able to check yourself real fast and humble yourself really quick, because if you carry yourself in that way in the streets and people recognize it, then they're going to be turned off by it. It's one thing to be cocky and arrogant, and it's another thing to be confident in what you know and how you do it. So you got to have some of that. And if we're going to be ex-gang members, like we mentioned earlier, you got to do a lot of vetting with that. Don't just, oh, I'm going to hire this ex-gang member. He just got out of prison and we're going to give him $40,000 a year to do our work. And then he doesn't even know what that work is, or he intimidates you and scares you. I'm gonna do what I want. So just give me my money. There's going to be a whole bunch of problems with that. So make sure that you're doing the best you can to make sure that you know what you want to do, how you want to do it, what your design's going to be, and then try to match the right people to that. And it'll help you go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Vic hit, you know, most of the core qualities, you know, definitely. If I could just add, and someone that's open, it has to be a person that's open. If you get someone that's strong from the community, or ex-gang member, or just a regular community member, but if they're so set in their ways where they're not trying to be flexible and learn and grow with a program like this, you'll be stuck, you know. So like Vic said, as you're vetting them, you know, if they're bringing a lot from the community, or that's that community activist, but are they really to work in this model? Are they willing to really work and understand you have to collaborate with partners, and, you know, we take it to another level. So that's definitely something that I feel is key. And also with, you know, the heart to work with this population, the heart and the passion. And I always say, you have to have a tough heart, because it's rough, you know, to spend time with a young person and, you know, notice some of them, they're throwing their lives away, or someone that we're losing them to this violence. But you got to get up the next morning and keep pushing through this. It's tough work. It definitely is. And we've seen some tough individuals be broken down by outreach, you know, their own personal life. They say, I can't go through this, trying to go through these young people and get them to a better place. It's just not working for me. So understand where they're at, you know, and where they want to go. And then that vetting, as Vic said, is very crucial.
It really helps, because I've watched where you can't get into personal stuff with some of the staff. You know, you just can't. You can't. There's certain questions you can't ask. But this work will bring up your own trauma. This work will challenge you. It'll challenge your heart. It'll challenge your mind. It'll challenge your spirit. It'll challenge you physically if you let it. Compassion fatigue definitely gets you. You have to have such the ability to be able to recognize and see those things and be aware, so that you can cope. And as folks that are supervising street outreach workers, you need to recognize that, because during my period of supervising for many years, it's been, you start learning a lot about stuff that's going on in their personal lives, and it can affect their work, even after you've hired them and brought them on. But being that mentor, being that person that can help them get through that, connect them to the resources they need so they're better for you, then that means they're going to be better for the kid. and the families in the community and the things that we're trying to do. But, you know, mental health is becoming the forefront a whole lot more. And if it's one thing I've learned, the mental health, Jay mentioned grief earlier and trauma, a lot of PTSD going on. If you're a person that has experienced some of this in your life or tough things in your life, this work will bring it out. And if you ain't ready, you won't last. And you got to have thick skin. You got to be able to work through it. It takes a lot of time, but once you get through it, you want to be the strongest and the best person you can to serve the community and to serve the kids. So you got to be right as best you can.
I could just, one last thing on that, Celeste.
Sure.
A lot of programs early on, and hopefully throughout the presentation today, we gave you an idea of what an outreach worker, you know, definitely should look like. But as you're going in as a new program, make sure that that's solid as far as what our program wants. And don't let individuals and outreach workers who you're hiring start dictating how your program is going to look. Yes, you want to get some tools or some ideas of what that person will look like. But if you're solid on what we shared today in the presentation of what an outreach worker should look like, or these are the expectations of an outreach worker, then it's not a bad thing if you hire for and they just didn't work. You know, we've had some that it was good people, but they just didn't work. And we stayed solid to what we needed for our program and to get that good worker.
Thank you. Thank you both for those excellent points. As we wrap up the panel discussion, do you have any final comments that you'd like to share with our participants today?
Be patient with this. If you're new, be patient with it. Like I said earlier, it can be trying. It could be lonely work. You don't feel like you're making much of an impact, but take your time developing what you need to develop and make sure you understand where you want to go. Don't let nobody else control it. I do what I want here. And I'm telling you, in the beginning, sometimes I would let other folks influence me or get in my ear, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And I kind of was like, man, I already know what I need to do. Why you keep, you know, but I'm in a level of politics that sometimes you got to move like that, or it could cause some issues for your program. So I have to make decisions. But when you're first getting started, I have to echo Jay again. It's so nice to hear somebody else say some of the same things that you've learned. Know where you're going, know what car you're driving, know where you want to go, know how you want to do it. And if later on you want to put some 24s on there, you want to put some big choppers on there, and you want your ride to look nice, and you want some candy paint, let that thing shine, your program will shine. Let it happen, little at a time. Take your time, be flexible, be patient. Don't start small and then expand, and take your time and seek advice. Seek a lot of advice. You got the Gang Center here. Jay and I are here. Take your time with it and seek advice, because I think coming up in the game the way I did, I didn't have any. I didn't have anybody to vent to. I didn't have anybody to kind of really talk to. I kind of just did it on my own and figured it out. And I had a lot of bumps and scrapes, but at the end of the day, no regrets, because I came out better on the other end, because I'm still in it. I'm a champion here in Houston for this work. So I keep it going with my staff in our office. But be the champion, keep pushing it, model it the best you can, because once it's got credibility, man, the sky's the limit. You can do some good stuff. So good luck to you. Appreciate you all your time listening to us, but you can do some good things, man. Don't think you can't. You can.
Yeah, and I would like to close with saying just the fact that you guys took the time to be a part of this, it shows a lot. And if you're on here and you're not in a position or role where you're going to be actually doing outreach work, but just to understand that and understand what this is about. And if you do have outreach workers in your community, or you guys try to, you know, implement the comprehensive gang model, you having this understanding and you being able to hold it accountable, it's only going to help your community. And what we're talking about today is real, you know, it's life and death. You know, we're talking about kids and young people that are just throwing their lives away to something that with a program and some proper direction, you know, we can make a huge impact, and it helps everyone.
Well, thank you very much. I want to remind everyone just to stay for a few more minutes. We have some important information to share with you, but before that, I'd just like to thank Jay and Victor again for this wonderful presentation, for this very valuable information. And for those of you who we weren't able to respond to in the panel discussion, we will respond to you via email. So my apologies for that, just trying to stay on time. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the resources that we have through NGC. Some of you may have visited the NGC website. We have a lot of resources available to you as you think about this work, as you conduct the work in the community. There's outreach worker safety tips, multidisciplinary gang intervention teams with both Jay and Victor spoke about, street outreach and the OJJDP Comprehensive Gang Model, and best practices to address community gang problems and mobilizing communities to address gang problems. So we encourage you to visit our website. Right now I'm going to, and finally, I just want to thank again OJJDP for their support for these types of trainings. We really think they're valuable to everyone that has joined today, and we hope that you'll join us again for future webinars. With that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Sterling Strimmel. Sterling.
Thank you again for joining us. Again, if anyone has questions that weren't addressed, feel free to direct those to the National Gang Center at our email address posted in the chat. As a reminder, there will be additional webinars in this Community Violence Intervention Addressing Gang series. So that will help provide participants with a more in-depth understanding of effective strategies to address gangs. We will notify everyone who registered via email when registration is open for the next webinar in the series. The National Gang Center is also working on podcast episodes specific to street outreach, as well as additional outreach training. So be on the lookout at the National Gang Center website or on their social media. At this time, we do ask that everyone take a few minutes to complete our survey coming up in the chat now or on your screen, as you can see by the slide. You can complete the survey by scanning the QR code with your smartphone or by clicking the link in the chat box. This survey is completely anonymous and provides incredibly valuable information to guide our work. We will leave the link open for a few minutes so that everyone can complete the survey. And again, we would like to thank you all for joining us, as well as our moderators and presenters. We'd also like to thank OJJDP for their continued support of this work in the field. This will now conclude today's webinar. Again, please take a few minutes to answer our online evaluation. I hope you all have a great day.